Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to our next edition of our Avid Audio Community plugin. My name is Greg Stryke Chin. It is a pleasure to be with you all today. I hope everyone's doing well. I see some familiar faces or names in our participants list. I see some new names as well. So wherever in the world you might be, thank you and welcome. We're really happy to have you guys here. We've been doing these now for the last couple of months. Obviously, we find ourselves in a very strange time with this pandemic. So we wanted to make sure that here at Avid, we wanted to stay engaged with everyone and give you guys some of our time and make sure that you guys are staying creative and staying working and we want to be here for you guys, for you all as well. We know this is a very difficult time. I hope everybody's staying safe. And again, wherever in the world you might be, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So obviously we're live streaming this here on Zoom. So all of our registrants are here going to be able to ask some questions a little bit later. I'll get into that in just a second. But also we're also live streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. So wherever you might be, again, welcome. We do have moderators across all of those platforms. I want to say thank you to all of our amazing product specialist team across the world. Who are here helping out. Here with me in the Zoom, we've got Dave Tyler and Simon Sherborne, who are going to be my main moderators out of the UK. So Dave, Simon, thank you. They're going to be fielding the questions in the Q&A section. But if you do have questions, if you're in some of the other on the other platforms, you can ask those of the moderators there. I think we do have some seats available here in the Zoom chat. So if you'd like to gain a seat, I think the moderators on those platforms will announce how to get in if you'd like to. So let's just kind of jump into it. We've got we're going to be covering something that's very dear and near to my heart, which is electronic dance music, and we're going to be doing that here live in my studio. I'm based in Miami, Florida. My name is Greg Chin. I am the audio evangelist for the company, for Avid. I've been with the company for 14 years, but that's one of my day jobs. My other day and night job is I'm also a music producer, a recording artist and DJ, and primarily create electronic music. So there's like techno, house, ambient. If you heard some of the music that was playing on the intro, that was one of my ambient pieces. And I've released music on a ton of different labels like Tronic, Ovum, if you're familiar with underground dance music. And I've remixed different artists like Madonna, Depeche Mode, Pink, and a bunch of others. So it's a real pleasure for me to be here. I love working with the team here at Avid. I love making music. And one of the things I always get asked about is how I kind of create my music. A lot of times, we're, obviously with Pro Tools, we talk a lot about how amazing Pro Tools is as a recording and editing and mixing platform. We tend to not talk about it so much as a music creation platform. Obviously, we know that a lot of the music and a lot of audio that gets created out in the world ends up in Pro Tools anyway, because it is the best sounding DAW out there. But as far as being able to create, we know that there are a lot of different options out there, Ableton Live, Logic, Cubase. There's so many great DAWs available for that. But I actually really love making my music directly in Pro Tools, and it's a very robust, very flexible DAW for that. So I'd like to show off some of that a little bit today. So before I jump into it, let me first give a little bit of some housekeeping at the top, how you can get the most out of the webinar. So specifically, if you are here on the Zoom, we're going to have some Q&A. But just on the right, I'm kind of going to be the sole speaker for the most part today. Apologies, but that's the way it is today. But if you want to go ahead and on the Zoom, if you click on the top right hand corner, just make sure gallery view is selected. Actually, it's not really going to matter. You can actually have speaker view, but a little bit later, we're actually going to have Simon and Dave jump in. So you might want to have that gallery view on, so that when they're on and we're kind of conversing, you'll be able to get a bird's eye view of everybody that's talking. Also, because we have so many folks here in the room, want to make sure that you hide any non-video participants. That way, your screen's not crowded. So you can do that by just clicking on those three little dots by your mute, and then selecting hide non-video participants. Okay, that's be good for you. So for those of you who would like to submit questions, so Simon and Dave will be taking questions throughout the course of the event. So feel free to ask as you need. They're going to be reserving some questions to then hand over to me during the Q&A portion. We'll do that around 15 minutes, before the hour. We might go a little bit longer. We'll just kind of gauge your guys' interest and see how many folks are still here. But if you want to ask a question, we ask that you just click on the Q&A icon in the menu bar and then type your question. That'll get submitted, and either Dave, Simon, or myself will answer it when the time is right. Okay. So let's get right into it. So I kind of gave myself a little bit of an intro to explain who I am a little bit. It's a real pleasure to be here. Like I said, I'm based in Miami, Florida, and this is a couple of shots of my home studio. My wife and I bought our home last year. We're still not finished. Obviously, the pandemic kind of curtailed some of the plans I have for the room. It's not soundproofed. It's not really treated yet. But this is really where I create. I make a lot of music here. Play video games here too, but mostly music, and certainly Avid work. This has now become my office during the pandemic for sure. So I do a host of things. You can kind of see that my layout. I've got an S3 control surface along with a Pro Tools dock. I'm obviously using Pro Tools. That's kind of the heart of everything. I am an HDX user, but I didn't start off as a TDM or HDX user. I actually was a full-on native, actually an LE Pro Tools user. My last album was created 100% in Pro Tools LE. But I do now leverage HDX. We're actually going to be using Pro Tools natively today because we're going to be using the Zoom interface. And then I also do, I use a host of other things, Native Instruments Machina. I've got a couple of different MIDI controllers here. I've actually been toying around a lot with the doubler. It's really cool kind of voice to MIDI thing, which is really interesting. I'd like to cover that some other time. I mean, I'm going to do a very high level, overview of how I create music, but I've really been experimenting with some other things. So let me go ahead and just kind of jump right into it. So I come from an old school kind of mentality. I have a lot of hardware. I mean, you can see in the picture there, I've got all the old Roland equipment, TR-909, 808, 101, 3. I've got a couple of 303s, etc. So those are all near and dear to my heart. And I love the fact now that we have the ability to do a lot of that, or most of that, virtually as well. So let me just jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share here and jump right into my Pro Tools screen. And hopefully this will be fun. So let's go ahead and share a portion of my screen. Let's move this over here. And then I've got my computer sound. So you should now be seeing my Pro Tools screen. So what you're looking at, typically when the product specialist team, myself, when we're out in the field doing demos, we actually really plan our demos ahead of time. And we've got really quick ways to kind of access, shortcuts or using markers or, window configurations to kind of quickly bring things up, and things are what we call kind of baked. What I wanted to do today is do something a little bit different. We spend a lot of time in the field, or have been spending a lot of time in the field over the years, doing these kinds of demos, but I wanted to do something, again, a little bit different today. So I figured what I would do, I get so many questions on very specific parts of my workflow in creating electronic dance music in Pro Tools. I figured what I would do is actually take a song that I'm actually working on and show you where things are as I'm working on this song. So this is a real look at how I'm creating music. So what I wanted to do first is, this is a piece that started off with a good friend of mine, Matt Mailer, who's also based here, a musician based here in Miami. Goes under the name Anti, just released his first record, I think it was about a year or so ago. And he's been working on some really amazing music. And we decided that we wanted to collaborate on some stuff. So he sent me some ideas of a couple of things that he was working on. And one piece that really kind of struck a chord with me, no pun intended. And what I did is I said, well, let's go ahead and take some of the pieces out, and then I'll build some stuff around that, and we'll kind of throw the files back and forth. So what you're looking at here is kind of just some audio of the original song that I've pulled out. And let me go ahead and play it for you, just so you get a little quick idea of where things are here. Let's get into Pro Tools. All right, here we go. So this is just a synth line, kind of the main synth line that Matt had created, and it's at 115 BPM. Let me jump right into the heart of it. A very kind of slow, kind of a droning kind of thing, and I really dug it. I felt that this would really work in a more up-tempo, more of a dance floor, more of a techno vibe. So I had him send it over. Here it is. This is the main synth line without any sidechain or any effects. Pretty dry. So the first thing I wanted to do is just bring it into Pro Tools and then kind of conform it to what I needed it to be. So there's one of the things you'll find with Pro Tools. It's extremely flexible, and it's really you can work the way you want to work. So I'm going to show you one way of doing this, but I'm showing you one way. There are going to be several different ways to do a lot of this stuff in Pro Tools. So the first thing I wanted to do was kind of make sure I get to right on the downbeat. So one of the tools I love to use for that is a tool we call Tab the Transient. And that's simply just using this little shortcut here. Tab the Transient, making sure that's on. And then what that's going to enable me to do is literally use my tab key. Let me get back into Pro Tools here. And that's going to jump directly to the next transient. So you can see here that it's already done that. And then I'm just going to use a shortcut A to chop off everything to the left of that transient. And of course, I'm on grid mode, so I can just go ahead and push this on the grid. And then the next thing I'm going to go ahead and want to do, using Audio Suite, I'm going to go ahead and conform this to a different tempo. So I know this is 115, and I want to conform it to a tempo. So I've chosen 126. That's right around where I normally play as a DJ, and that's really how the track can be built. So I'm going to use Audio Suite to go ahead and conform this. Now, again, this is just one way to do it. So I'm just going to go in the pitch shift here, and I'm going to scroll down to Xform, one of the built-in Audio Suite plugins in Pro Tools here. And I'm going to go ahead and, with that selected, go ahead and choose my polyphonic algorithm here, and I'm going to tell it exactly what I want it to do. So my original tempo is 115, so I'm going to put that here. And I want it to end up, it's already selected the tempo of the song, which is 126. And all I need to go ahead and do is render that. So just for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. I already have it already rendered out here. So you can actually now hear what that sounds like rendered. So that's now at the tempo. You can hear, the quality, there are no artifacts kind of hanging about. Sounds really nice and clean. So now we're ready to go. So now I'm ready to kind of build from there. Now, typically when, and this is the question I get asked a ton, is how I create my drums. And most of my drums actually end up working out of Machina inside of Pro Tools. So here we have Machina, and you can see here, I've already got a pattern that I've created. And this was actually done just using Machina standalone. So I've got a Machina Studio. I've got a couple of the other units as well. I do tend to travel with them, although I'm not traveling much right now. But I've got a Machina Micro in my bedroom, one in the TV room, and I usually tend to kind of create, move my laptop around. So this is a pattern I'd come up with. And one of the things I really like to make sure I do is have an easy way to kind of access that. So I did want to spend a couple of minutes here on how you can actually use Machina for multi-track audio to be able to actually access it really quickly. So I can see that there's a bunch of stuff happening in the chat, and I promise I'll make sure I get to some of this stuff as soon as I can. There's already a question about how I keep my hardware synths in sync when I'm sending MIDI out of Pro Tools. Actually, I'll show a camera view of that. I have I'm using Pro Tools as the main sync, but most of that is just being controlled via MIDI. I do have an SPX1 Roland sync box that helps me out with converting MIDI, CV, things of that nature from my modular and from some of my other synths. I'll show a little bit of that a little bit later, and that's something we're actually going to want to deep dive into at some point. But for right now, we'll focus here on the drums. So I'll just quickly kind of play this pattern back, and let's see what we've got here. So everything from a kick, there's actually a little sub bass line happening. And what I want to do is move this pattern into Pro Tools, because I actually do all of my editing, my arranging happens in Pro Tools. but this is going to be the core of my drums. So I want to be able to get that in Pro Tools. So what you might want to do, there are a couple different ways to do this. My favorite way, and I'm going to walk you through it. Normally I would have just used a track preset, but I'm going to show you how to set up that track preset specifically if you're using Machina. So you can see I've got all these sounds here ready to go. What you're going to want to do in Machina before you do anything else is make sure that your kit is ready to be output through on different channels, right? And different MIDI channels. So that's going to be a key factor. So the first thing you might want to do is you've got Machina already instantiated on an instrument track. What I recommend doing is then adding 15 more instrument tracks under that, which you'll be able to assign. And I'll show you how we assign those so that it corresponds to all the sounds, to the 16 sounds out of a kit in Machina. So the first, the first instantiation again is going to be Machina. 15 more instrument tracks under that. We'll assign those in a second. Coming back to Machina, what you're going to want to make sure you do is you're going to want to make sure that each one of those sound banks or each one of those sound slots has its own output ready to go. So as we click on each one of these sounds, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we've selected the sound area here. The first thing we're going to do is make sure we're on MIDI, and then on input, we're going to want to make sure that we switch each one of these to host, and then each channel. So sound bank 1 or sound area 1 will be host, MIDI channel 1 going down. They'll all be host, and then we'll the corresponding MIDI channel for that number. So sound bank 3 here, we'll make sure that's on channel 3 all the way down to 16, right? In addition to that, the other thing we want to do is then click on output and make sure that these are all going to be on separate outputs. So you can see here my kick is going to be external 1, external 2, 3, 4, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then after we do all of that, we'll then head over to our mixer page, which is where I typically tend to do this setup. And we're going to want to set up those instrument tracks to be the correct external pieces correctly. So the first one, the one that the Machina is actually instantiated on, will be your main output or main input. And then as you go down the line, you'll want to make sure that you go to input, plugin, and then you'll just cascade those down from external 2 all the way to external 16. And then right up here under the instrument section, if you make sure you're showing that, whether it's in edit arrange window or on the mix window, you're going to want to make sure that you go in, and again, cascading, you're going to want to cascade from channel 1 and then all the way down to channel 16. Now, there's a reason that we do this setup, and I'll show you why here in just a second. So going back to our edit arrange window, now what we're able to do very quickly and easily is using the drag and drop functionality out of Machina. We have 2 ways we can drag and drop. We can drag and drop MIDI, or we can drag and drop audio. For this, I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop MIDI. So I just go ahead and click on that drag and drop MIDI, and then I'm going to bring that right over and line that up with my tracks here that are set up for Machina. So there they are, and they're already ready to go. And all I need to do now is I can actually delete this pattern, and they're now ready for me directly in Pro Tools. So the next step from this is you're probably going to want to possibly create an easy way to bring this back up so you don't have to go through this every time. So typically what I would do is, what I would recommend before you do the drag and drop is, let's go ahead and add all of these tracks, all of these Machina drum tracks, add them to a routing folder. So we launched folder tracks a couple months ago. I'm working in the shipping version. This is 2020.5 of Pro Tools Ultimate. I'm going to go ahead and right click on these tracks, and I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and move these all to a new folder. Okay. So I click new folder, and I have the option of sending it to a basic folder or a routing folder. I'm going to go ahead and use a routing folder for this, and I'm just going to go ahead and name this drums. Okay, and make sure that we have route tracks to the new folder. So this is going to give everything its own routing that I can actually put some plugins on it. Whatever I needed to do extra to those drums will happen directly on that auxiliary. Basically, I go ahead and click create, and there it is. It's activating those outputs and moving them all into that routing folder right now. Okay, And I like to make sure everything is the same color. So let's go ahead and make sure that is now the same color. So there are my drums, all nicely, neatly tucked into a folder. Now, to take this a step further, I want to make sure I'm able to access that in another session really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on the track title or the folder title, and I'm going to go ahead and save this as a track preset. Okay. So to save that as a track preset, right click, select track preset, and I'm just going to call this Machine of Drums and put it in a specific folder. And I've got a category here, call this instrument chain, and select OK. So now when I'm in another session, I can quickly bring that up and I can go ahead and drag and drop a new pattern, create a new pattern, drag and drop it without having to do all the work that I just kind of showed you. Okay. So moving on. Now there are a lot of different ways I can interact with these drums. Obviously, I can do it via the folder, but at some point I'm going to want to go ahead and do some arrangement here, so I can quickly just kind of group them all. So I just went ahead and selected those tracks, and I'm going to use Option Command G, where you can actually just right click on it and say you can actually group them and then create a group and then edit them from there. I can also even just loop them. So Option Command L brings up the clip looping window where I can tell it, go ahead and give me 64 bars of loops worth of drums. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. Again, very flexible, however you decide to do that. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit. One of the things I wanted to kind of showcase as well is how I work with MIDI and building sounds and stuff in Pro Tools. So one of the tenets of Pro Tools that I really love is we really like the idea of audio and MIDI working very similarly. We want them to work as if when you're working with one, when you switch to working with the other, that there's a very similar consistent workflow, right? So we have that available to us in Pro Tools. One of the things I really love in Pro Tools, and I've shown this pretty much every demo I've done since 2006, is actually the feature that brought me into Pro Tools. And it's one that I'll continue showing because I think it's very powerful. And I think for music creators is something that I think gets overlooked, but it's very, very, very powerful. So we call it real-time properties. So what I've got here is I've got just a very simple MIDI line that I kind of wrote. I'm not going to actually record anything with my MIDI controllers today, but just because of the latency on Zoom, it gets a little crazy. But I do have something here, and I'm using Hybrid. Hybrid is a really, really amazing polyphonic synth from our friends over at Advanced Instrument Research. I've been using it really since it was launched back with Hybrid 1. It's a staple in pretty much, I would say 80, 85, 90% of my production work will feature Hybrid in some way, shape, or form. But what I've just got it here doing the default kind of sound, and let's give a quick listen to what it's doing. All right, not much, very simple. But what I'd like to go ahead and do is show off a couple things here. I'd like to go ahead and show off real-time properties. So what real-time properties is it's a feature in Pro Tools that takes 5 of the most common MIDI parameters and allows you to affect them in real time non-destructively. What do I mean by that? Well, typically when you're doing anything, when you're applying something to a piece of MIDI, it's normally a destructive process. So take quantize, for instance, which you can totally do that here in Pro Tools as well, where you select a clip, a MIDI clip, you go into your events window, and then you want to go ahead and quantize something. You can totally do that just like you can in any other DAW, and then apply that. And then pretty much what you've got is you're basically married to that. You're stuck with that process that you've done as you go on in time. What you're able to do using real-time properties is take 5 of those MIDI processes. So you've got quantize, note duration, note delay, note velocity, and transposition, and do them at any point when you want in real time, and again non-destructively. So I'm going to go ahead and just select just this little area here, and I'm going to go ahead and quantize it. So to do that in real-time properties, just hit quantize, and then I'll tell it exactly what value I want. So just to show you, half notes, right? and go quarter note. And it's all non-destructive. So obviously I'm doing it in real time. And at any point, if I decide that I don't want to, I want to go back to my original performance, all I got, just turn it off. And I have, that way I'll always retain my original performance, okay? So let's go ahead and quantize this. And of course, we can also transpose this at any point. So I can go ahead and transpose this by octave. I can go down a couple of octaves. So I'll just do -2 octaves, let's say. We can go by steps, so I can go up a couple of steps. And again, all real time and non-destructive, so I can always change it and turn it off if I need to, right? Now, if you do decide that you'd like, you like what you've got, you want to go ahead and actually apply that, you can actually do that very simply by just right-clicking on the clip and then selecting MIDI real-time properties, and then you can write whatever you've done to the track. And then it'll actually then now become a static or destructive process. But very, very, very open, very flexible. And I love using this. I use this all the time. I use this every day. This is probably the most important part of my workflow and really the thing that brought me into Pro Tools. So let's also talk a little bit about a couple of tips and tricks I wanted to show around sound design. So when you're sound designing, we all use presets. I love presets as well. There's some really great instruments and some really great presets out there. I also like building sounds from scratch. So what I wanted to do for this sound is kind of build something from scratch. So I've got hybrid up here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is just build something quickly. So hybrid, you've got 6 oscillators, 2 parts, so 3 oscillators per part. And you can quickly, come up with some really great sounds here. And then what I'd like to do is kind of just go ahead and, that's the pattern that I'm going to use in the track. I'm going to go ahead and actually turn that into audio quickly so I can continue moving on. Now, typically, I will tend to leave my virtual instruments up and live throughout the course of the production. However, if it's something that's going to be like a small clip that might be a bar or a couple where I know that's something I'm going to repeat and not change, I'll probably end up turning that into audio pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and build a sound really quickly. We'll go ahead and let this just kind of loop this little area back and forth. And I'm just going to go ahead and quickly kind of build a sound out here. So we'll use a couple of these oscillators in part 1. We'll add another oscillator here, and we'll not so. All right, there we go. And then I'm going to detune this just a little bit. All right, and then we'll add a third oscillator, add a little bit of noise, and a little bit of sub underneath, down an octave. Yeah, that'll work. We'll turn that down a little bit. So we're getting somewhere. What I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to click over here on the parts presets, and I'm going to take those 3 oscillators and copy them again over to part B. But what I'm going to do in part B now, if I turn part B on, you get the exact same thing. But what I'm going to do with part B is actually tune that up a 7th. So if you're into things like Detroit techno, I'm a fan of 5th, 7th, big part of so I'm not combine those together. So we have kind of like a little bit with that 7th. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I want to be able to automate, have some movement going on a little bit in the track using that sound. So I'm going to go ahead and use my cutoffs here. I'm going to turn these both up, and I'm going to assign these. Hybrid has got these 4 morph knobs, and I can assign anything I want to, any combination of things to those knobs. So or those encoders rather. I'm going to go ahead and take my cutoffs. I'm going to right-click on my cutoffs, and I'm going to assign these to morph 1. Turn that all the way down so you can see it's now yellow, telling me the range that I've got available to me. And now when I play it back using the morph knob, now of course I can easily automate that by just right-clicking on the encoder here, and I tell it I want to go ahead and learn that on my MIDI controller. And let me go ahead and switch over here. So if you can see my camera now, I'm showing a little bit. You can't really see my controllers, but I've got my complete control, my Native Instruments controller, and I've got my Novation 61SL underneath that. All I need to do is just go ahead and quickly just right-click and then select the encoder, and now I've got that encoder ready to go if I wanted to automate something. Very, very simple, and I can very easily automate that as I need to. So go ahead and reset window and back in Pro Tools. Come on, window, work with me here. Okay, so moving along here. Now Zoom is not behaving and wants me to resize my window the entire time. There we go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop share here for just a second. And then I'm going to go ahead and reshare because it's being a little problematic. But that's all right. All right, so let me go ahead and reshare my screen. And let's see here. Still not letting me do that. All right, hang on. Let me just try one more time. And we'll just go to a specific window. See if that behaves nicely. There we go. Okay, so the other part I wanted to kind of share a little bit is, one of the things, I'm, obviously a part of the community of dance music creators all around the world. And I've had, the opportunity to work with so many folks. One of the things that drives me nuts, regardless of what DAW folks are working in, is I don't want to say we're lazy, but I'll call it laziness. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit right now in my workflow, and I'm at fault of this as well, is how we kind of treat when we're going to use effects in our workflow. So obviously this sound is dry. There are a couple different ways that folks will typically tend to use effects in their production. Obviously, I think when you're looking at preserving CPU cycles and things of that nature, you might want to look at using the built-in effects. Obviously, Hybrid's got some really great built-in effects that we can leverage. So we've got things like delay and then reverb. So if I'm going to, let's go ahead and just pull up a little bit of that. These will be a little bit accentuated, but then I'll pull them back here. All right. So that's one way we can actually, leverage the plugins or the effects built into your virtual instruments. Another thing, typically folks will like to do, let me go ahead and turn these off here. I'll just turn them off, is actually instantiate plugins or effects on each one of those instruments. Now that's all fine and dandy, and I think this is where kind of the workflow tends to get a little muddled. Certainly when I receive projects from folks to mix, one of the things that drives me crazy is seeing something like something like a reverb. In this case, Deverb, which is a reverb built into Pro Tools that I use all the time. It's amazing, very simple, but really great sounding reverb. And maybe they've got something, something simple like a medium hall, just a little wet. But then they'll actually instantiate that on every single track, which is fine if you've got a powerhouse machine and you want to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think one of the things you might want to consider is using auxiliaries, bussing things. So what I wanted to quickly show is how I do that. And let me just make sure, Dave, Simon, I just wanted to make sure I didn't double check. Is my audio coming through okay from the Pro Tools screen?
Yes, it's
okay.
fine.
Thank you. All right, so thank you. Moving along. So I've got a couple of auxiliaries set up here, and let me bring up my mix window. And to do that, I'm now going to have to share that window. So let me go ahead and share my mix window. There it is. So my mix window, I've got a couple of auxiliaries right down here that I've already started. And you can see here, I typically like to have one effect per auxiliary so I can kind of bust them and mix it as I like. So I've got, again, Deverb is already here. Now you'll notice that I've got it 100% wet. And I know for many of you that are here on the webinar, you're experts, you're professionals, and you know this already. But I'm really doing this for those of you who might be a little bit newer to music making, music creating, and why kind of using auxiliaries and bussing things this way is it's efficient. it's going to save up CPU cycles from, instead of you having to instantiate or pull up those plugins on every single, track that you want to use it on. And it's just a better way to kind of manage your session. Specifically also, if someone else is going to be helping you or maybe working on it, maybe helping you mix it, it's going to certainly make life a lot easier for them as well. So on my reverb, I've got it 100% wet. I've got a church reverb going on here. And I've got that on a setup on a bus that's A34. But just to be consistent and efficient and good, I'm going to go ahead and rename this and just call this my verb. That way, if I bus anything to it, I can quickly find it. And on my next auxiliary, I've got mod delay. And again, you'll see I've got 100% wet. I've got pretty high feedback. And then this is just a couple of different patterns here going on. So I've got quarter note delay on the left side and a dotted third eighth note on the right side, which is something I love to do. Kind of really helps certain instruments to move nicely within the track, so it's not so static. So that's mod delay. Love that delay, and I'm going to go ahead. So I've got this coming in on 5 and 6. I'm going to go ahead and rename that and just call this one delay. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to show you how we can actually send some stuff directly there. So I'm going to go ahead and use hybrid synth. So let me go ahead and solo my auxiliaries as well. Let me take off the reverb off the hybrid. So it's going to be dry again. But this time what I'm going to do is use my sends. I'm going to go to my bus. And there's my verb. All right, so here's my verb floating here. And let me go ahead and add that one there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my delay as well to bus it there. I've got a floating fader for that. So now what I'm able to do is just basically send the signal out, keeping it dry here on its main track. And I can now send it out to the verb and control the amount. Same thing with the delay. Now we have something that's a little bit more dynamic, moves nicer. I'll go ahead and unsolo all of that. Okay, so that makes it a lot nicer, a lot smoother, and just a nice way to also make sure that you're kind of reserving some CPU cycles, and just a good practice, I think. Now that doesn't mean that you can't add some effects. So for instance, I have something I was working on here, an Ace synth. I wanted kind of like a support synth. So I'm using Ace for that. Really great plugin by Yuhi. I love this plug. And you can see here that I've got a couple things going on here, separately. I haven't done any sending yet, but let me go ahead and pull up these plugins just to give you an idea. I do have mod delay here, so I'm going to go ahead and take that off, so we can actually send it, using the bus. So no insert there, but I've got a couple things going on here. The first thing I've got going on is I've just taken out a little bit of the low end using the air kill EQ. So if that's a bypass, you can hear a lot of that low end kind of punch coming back, but I don't need that in the track. So I'm just going to go ahead and take some of that low end out. And then the meta filter. This is actually a really cool delay by Waves. And this is allowing me to use an LFO to kind of do some movement there. And again, that helps to make it dynamic. But of course, I might want to go ahead and add a little bit of the reverb. So again, what I'll do now is, that plugin, that meta filter is only going to probably be on that one track. So I'm not going to go ahead and create an auxiliary for that. But if I wanted to go ahead and use my standard, my reverb and delay, I can now do that very easily here. Let's go ahead and send some verb. That as well. Great. And another trick I like to do is, these sends are automatable as well. So there might be points in the track where I'm, kind of crescendoing to a build and to a breakdown. I can actually automate that so that, as the synth is going, the reverb kind of builds and builds and builds into the break, and then, really nice dynamic structure for the song. So there's just a couple other quick things I wanted to show, and then I want to make sure we get to Q&A, and I apologize, I've not really been keeping an eye on it because I've been so super focused here. One of the things that people always ask me about, a couple of things. One is how I kind of use my external stuff, which someone was asking about it earlier. There's a lot to cover there, so I kind of can't really go very deep into it, but I wanted to give a quick little overview of how I kind of work with it. So switching cameras again, let me just point out that I am using a really cool modular setup. I got into modular a few years ago, and one of the great things about modular is that there's just so much stuff that you're able to do. I love using it. I'm a big nerd. I'm actually going to be building 2 more modular systems here for the room. But for this song, what I wanted to do is get some like really nice, cool grit. So I use, several modules, but the main sound is coming from a module, a VCA called Liquelic Eteritas from a company out of LA called Noise Engineering. They're very good friends of mine. I love those guys. So shout out to Noise Engineering. I love everything they do. If you're getting into modular, or even if you're already into modular, check out their stuff. They're amazing. So I want to give those guys a shout out. Their stuff is just gnarly sounding. Actually, Matt Lang, if you're familiar, he's the one that actually introduced me to the company and to the folks there, and they're absolutely amazing. So let me go ahead and just show you quickly how you can kind of set up being able to control both MIDI. Obviously, modular is CV controlled voltage, but like I mentioned earlier, I'm using a Roland SBX1 to do control voltage to MIDI. So I'm able to control all of that via my MIDI controllers in Pro Tools and record that. So let me go ahead and stop share here and switch back to my main Pro Tools window. Let me pull that up. 1 sec. And I just want to show you something really quickly here. There it is. Okay. So you'll see here, I've got a couple of tracks here that I've pulled up. And this is basically how I get my modular in to Pro Tools. So I've got a modular, I've got a MIDI track, and this is how I am able to access my SBX1 to then, which is now then controlling the modular. So I'm able to, control that there. And then audio-wise, my modular goes into my Omni on inputs 3 and 4. I'm not using the Omni right now. I'm actually using the Zoom interface, which is why I won't be able to show you exactly how that round trips back. But what I'll basically do is I'll record some MIDI and then I'll capture that in the session. So you can see I've got some audio here from my modular. This is all Liquelic Eteritas, nothing else. One of the things I love doing, Pro Tools is so powerful in this way. I'll actually take pieces of this, cut it up, and then I'll create patterns around this. So, I can easily, I won't take too much time doing it, but let's say I just wanted to add that to the track here. Let's go ahead and push it right to the front. I can even add a plugin, let's say something like Air Pumper, to kind of help me kind of do a quick side chain. And what that's going to do, I'll just leave it on the default. So very, very simple, easy way. And being able to use your external synths and drum machines, I think, is a really cool way to bring in some different color and texture. The one last thing I wanted to cover, and then we're going to jump right into the Q&A section, is the master. So typically, we always recommend when you're going to master something, you have a good mix, you have a good pre-master that you've rendered, sent out to your mastering house, your mastering engineer. But because I'm a DJ and I also play the production that I create, one of the things I like to do is I like to test this stuff out. So really what I like to do is create kind of a fake master, a working master that I can kind of try out. And it also helps me give notes to my mastering engineer. So on my master here, what I'm going to go ahead and do, I've saved a track preset that I kind of like. It's kind of a working preset. So I'm going to go ahead and recall that here, and then I'll just quickly talk through it. So here it is. This is my kind of techno chain, and that's going to pull everything right in. And I'll quickly just walk through that. And first, I'll let you hear what it sounds like. without. That's clearly with. So what do I have going on here? Very simple. Just a little bit of EQ. This could be either, this is EQ3 built into Pro Tools. I might use an SSL EQ from UA or Waves. I also really love the AE400 from McDSP. It's actually probably my big go-to one on the master. And then I'll add a little touch of reverb. Actually, I don't really have any right now, but maybe a % or two, just to kind of glue things together. It's not really as an effect, but it really just kind of takes the texture of everything that's going on within the track and allows it to kind of help it to kind of live in the same space. And then what I love to do, most of this stuff I'm playing in clubs. I want to make sure that the low end is managed well. This is a really great tool called the Audio Monofilter from a company by the name of Nugent. And really what I'm doing here is I'm taking a certain frequency, and from that frequency below that will automatically be summed to mono. And that really helps to manage the low end and really have it punch through on bigger sound systems for me. And then the last but not least, we have the ML4000, and this is really where the kind of the loudness and a lot of the other texture and color is coming from. This is just a starting point. I'll actually dial this in. I'll work, this is multi-band, so I'll be able to actually go in and affect each one of those bands individually. So it's a bit more accurate with what I want to do with the entire track. So that's a quick look. Again, it's kind of a high level overview. I did want to dive into a couple of things, specifically like the Machina workflow and what I'm doing with folder tracks, certainly using track presets. There's a ton more. I really have only scratched the surface. I know we've got a little bit of time left, and at this point, what I'd like to do, let me go ahead and, I'll leave my screen up just in case I need to show something. But what I'd like to do now is invite Dave and Simon to the chat. And I think if we have any questions that needed to be asked, and I think that we've got some stuff here. Should I just go ahead? Hey guys. Thanks for being here. So we've got some questions that you've already kind of pushed through. Do you want me to just go ahead and start with those?
Yeah, so we've been pushing some through. So some specific to what you were doing and some about the way that you work. So yeah, let's work through those.
Sure. So I'll start with Kachi here wanted to ask, what was the keyboard command that moved the clip all the way to the front? That's just the letter Y. You want to make sure that your single key command section here is just clicked, so you make sure that's on. So that allows single key commands to be used. Things like A for chopping clips to the left of the cursor, S for chopping clips to the right of the cursor, and Y, which Y just basically takes a clip and pushes it directly to the front of the session. So hope that answers that. Jet, thank you so much for your webinar. Thank you for being here, Jet. Hopefully you answered this question during your presentation, but in case you don't, my question is, how do you keep hardware synth in sync? Okay, yeah, so I kind of touched on that a little bit. So one of the things I think is important to realize, so we obviously use delay compensation in Pro Tools. It's a big part of being able to kind of keep things together. Luckily, that all adds up, even when you're using external synths. So using my external synths, while there's no specific delay compensation on those because they're hardware, once I bring it into Pro Tools, just kind of the way Pro Tools operates, it actually works out really well where I'm, depending on what my setting is on my playback engine, I'm able to actually control those and, really without a problem. So my hardware really feels as if I were using it as a plugin. So there's really not too much work to do there. Whether you're, if you're on a Mac, all your MIDI settings are here. It's a little bit different for PC. The Windows will be, you won't have the MIDI Studio. It'll be a little bit different, but you'll actually be able to kind of, take a look at all your MIDI devices and see exactly what's going on. So I hope that kind of helps answer that. You also asked about.
Sorry, Greg.
Yep.
I was just going to say, yeah, no, definitely delay comp should figure out most of that. But I was just going to mention you can offset the MIDI tracks from Pro Tools as well in the event menu in case there's some sync issue going on. You can individually set a delay on each track.
Yeah. You can actually also do that in real-time properties as well. So. Which is really helpful. Yeah, thanks for that, Simon. So yeah, Simon's also a dance music expert and producer as well. You can see his electron stuff and some other cool stuff behind him there.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, you know, I've used Machina in Pro Tools as my main instrument, and it's fascinating to watch how you do it because everyone does it completely differently. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things about Pro Tools. It's very flexible, so we all work very differently. And I think at some point we'll get Simon to come on and show some of his work. I know he's done one webinar already, but we'll get him to come on and show his workflow, and then I can join and learn some stuff because it's really amazing. And Dave has worked with some really amazing talent, you know, in the dance music world. He's worked with guys like Sasha, who's one of my favorite DJs, and you know, he's got some great insight as well. So moving on to some of the other questions. Is it possible to commit tracks with effects that are used via aux? Yeah, you actually can. You've got different ways to do it. If they're on the auxiliary, you can commit the auxiliary and it'll basically print that. I actually like to leave my auxiliaries live, but of course, if you're stemming things from maybe, you know, something that's going to be mixed in Atmos, maybe you're going to send it over to our buddy Shri, and he's going to, you know, do an immersive Atmos mix. You might want to go ahead and commit that. But yes, you can commit the auxes, you know, without an issue in Pro Tools. So that's pretty easy. Edwin Wilson wants to know, what approach would you have if you were doing it in an immersive format now that it's possible on Amazon and Tidal? There are many different ways to kind of look at it. I think the main thing for me that I'll mention, and Dave, Simon, if anybody wants to jump in, is stemming everything out to audio. You know, I just mentioned Shri, who's a colleague of ours. I did some stuff with him, and you know, I basically stemmed everything out. I left a couple of the plugins live, and you know, those were just the ones that we have, like Deverb and Mod Delay, just in case he needed to make some adjustments. But you can, you know, I could have just frozen it. Typically, when I commit for an immersive mix, I'll commit it, but I'll make sure that the original tracks are there in case the person who's mixing it wants access to the original track with the original plugins. I have not mixed anything immersively yet. I'm getting there, but I don't know, Dave, Simon, if you wanted to mention anything in addition to that.
No,
well, I was going to,
you know, we'll get Shri on to talk a little bit more about that workflow.
Yeah,
he's the man. But I know it's something that Greg, you say you're interested in. We've got lots of other kind of DJs who are starting experimenting. I think, didn't you say Matt Lang has done some mixes in Atmos, I believe. So yes, definitely something which is a lot of people are on a learning curve, I would say now.
Yeah, cool.
I think there is actually Shri's webinar where he talks about how to do this is up somewhere, isn't it? I think he actually mixes one of your tracks in that.
Yeah, he does. So yeah, Shri can probably send a link to that.
Yeah,
I know he's moderating one of the Facebooks. Maybe he can send a link over for the folks here as well. But yeah, you should definitely check that out. I want to jump over to a couple of these other questions so Jose Barros, welcome. Hello. Hi. About track presets. Can you save a group of tracks as a preset? You can. I recommend throwing them into a folder and then saving that as a track preset. I did that with Machina, and that makes it really nice and convenient because then you can just bring that back up. Everything's already in the folder. You can expand the folder and have everything you need right there. Again, you've got two folder types. You've got the basic and the routing. So if it's something that you're going to end up sending to different auxiliaries or whatever, you can just use a basic one. But I tend to group things in using the routing folder quite a bit, and it really helps me out when I get to mix. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. I did that earlier. So thank you for that question, Jose. Edwin Wilson wanted to know, how do I control the low end if I'm mixing and mastering for vinyl? Yeah, very important. The Nugent monofilter actually helps me do that quite a bit. Typically also when I test my stuff, obviously I do own 40,000 pieces of vinyl. I grew up as a vinyl DJ. I still buy vinyl. I don't play it really much anymore, but I still do think of that because a lot of my records do get pressed to vinyl. And low end management happens in two places. It happens in the mix. So you want to make sure that you're really kind of managing anything on the sub level, because you don't want to be able to have to press that dub plate and then have the needle start jumping up and down. But the Nugent monofilter actually is kind of my go-to tool to really help that low end management. And again, you just it's just really a matter of good mixing. It's good engineering, which will typically take care of that. So I hope that answers that for you. Peter Bride, so apologies if I'm messing up your name. wanted to know what's my favorite machine from NI. I'm assuming you meant, I'm guessing you meant Machina, and what my favorite. Oh, like the hardware. So if you're talking about the hardware, I'm still a really big fan of Studio. This is the the second generation. I love the size. I love the window. I love being able to access everything there. I do a lot of the sub mixing there, so I love that. I do have the micro. The micro I tend to take with me on the road. I have MK3 as well, which I will use in demos because I get to then also use that as my sound card. I love all of them. I've got every single one from Gen 1 all the way to now, and they're amazing. I love, shout out to my friends at NI. Love those guys. And yeah, but I would say that for my everyday studio use, Machina Studio is my go-to. So I hope that answered your question. Thank you for that. We've got another question, a couple other questions. Okay. Siva Prasad, and again, apologies if I mess up your name. It's not my intent, but wanted to know any tips on editing MIDI notes in Pro Tools, specifically using key commands. Sure, I can quickly show some stuff here. Double clicking on a MIDI clip. I don't know, Simon, Dave, is the MIDI editor showing now, or is it not?
Just the edit window.
Okay, hang on. Let's do this via. So I stay in the.
I noticed, yeah, you got that issue with Zoom where it.
Yeah.
Messes you around with yeah.
You should be able to see the MIDI editor now. Yeah, so there are a few different things we've added to the MIDI editor, and we're going to continue adding some stuff here. So just using your arrow keys, just so forward and back will take you forward and back. If I go ahead and select group notes, if I wanted to transpose that, let me go ahead and turn that down a little bit. I just use my arrow keys up and down. Or if I go ahead and hit the shift key and then arrow up and down, it's going to then transpose them by octave. All right, so that's shift arrow down, shift arrow up. If I wanted to, for those selected notes, if I wanted to go ahead and affect the velocity of all of those, it's really, really easy. Oh, and here I am. Let me just show copy, which is Alt, arrow up, arrow down. Really easy. So command arrow up and down will affect the velocity of the selected notes, okay? If I hold the shift key, arrow back and forth, if I shift and arrow right, will then select all the notes as I shift through. And yeah, so there are a few different ways you can do that. There's certainly more shortcuts, and I think we haven't done it yet. We'll definitely do some tech tips on that soon. If you've not checked out the tech tips, the team have started a YouTube page. So it's just I think it's avid.com/Pro Tools Tech Tips, one word. I think there's something like 70 or something tech tips there now. They're like under 2 minutes. Some of them are a little bit longer, but kind of really quick, easy tips from MIDI audio, working with immersive mixes. Kudos to the team for all the work they're doing there. So there's some really great stuff happening there. Well, I think we can go for a few more minutes if we like. I wanted to make sure I get to some of these questions. Let's see. Rob Swart wants to know, how do I use any effects for your drums within Machina, and do you experience any problems with delay compensation? So first, no, I don't experience any problems with delay compensation. And I do use effects once in a while. Typically, those will be more static effects, things like compression on certain sounds, a little bit of EQ before I transfer stuff out. But when I'm using it live, yeah, certainly I in my DJ sets, I'll use a lot of effects in Machina. But yeah, typically don't have any problems with delay compensation there. Delay compensation does help and takes care of a lot of the hard work behind the scenes. Gary Robinson, what are the advantages of moving up to an HD native or HDX system? So the main thing is going to be, so with HDX, obviously you have the ability to offload a lot of the work from your CPU, from your host computer to the card. So for effects, obviously not for instruments. Instruments are still going to remain host, but your effects, things like delays, reverbs, there's some really amazing plugins, and being able to leverage the power of the HDX card really makes things a lot easier. There's certainly a lot more, available to you as far as things like voices and things of that nature. So if you're getting into much bigger sessions, that require a lot more, bandwidth and CPU power, HDX is certainly a great way to go. HD native is a great way to go if you're still looking for the ability to have really low latency recording, have the quality of that. You're not going to find a better way to do that outside of an HDX system. An HD native is going to have the lowest latency as far as being able to record. So if you're recording vocals or recording live instruments, that's a great way to do that. And of course, the mix engine is hosted on the HD native chip, so to speak. So those are some of the advantages. There's certainly more. Certainly, HDX, when you're getting into mixing, immersively, there's going to be a lot more available to you there. Dave DeMarco, I just want to make sure I know we're kind of out of time, but Dave DeMarco, I've noticed that a few of your tracks seem to have a pitch shift applied to the reverb tail. How do you do that? So actually, I didn't do that. Those are just the presets kind of tailed off that way. That's the way they are. Certain reverbs have the ability to control pitch, but really what you were hearing was really just, kind of I don't know if you would say it would be a Doppler effect on the reverb, certainly on delay and echo, but I think that's what you were really just hearing. I didn't program that. That was just kind of the preset as it was tailing out. Anything else, guys?
So, well, hopefully I've fixed my audio working now. I think it was.
Yeah, there you go. You sound great.
Good. I think you're covering them all. I've been throwing them over from the chat over to you. And there's one last one about sidechains, about how you use them. I know that's a big question, but I know using sidechains can also be a big part of dance music production. So I don't know if you want to talk
it certainly is. Yeah, and I do use side. I didn't show it here. I mean, I feel like I've kind of beaten that one to death. However, I guess I haven't. I think that's something I can definitely do in a follow-up. But yeah, side chaining in Pro Tools is really easy, and it works the same way as it would in another DAW, really via an auxiliary. Typically what I'll use, so for instance, on a bass line, I'll use the kick drum to do some of the side chaining. But really what I'll do is I'll take that kick drum, copy it, and assign that to a ghost output. So that way, if I needed to side chain something like a bass line in a breakdown where that kick isn't, the actual kick isn't present, I'll have the ghost one actually as the key using a compressor and side chaining it where I don't have to have the actual sound that I'm using in the song doing the work. Although I can, but again, if I need to have it present where that kick drum, for example, isn't there, I'll basically ghost it on an invisible output, and then have that on the input, that ghost input on the compressor on the auxiliary. I know I just explained that without showing it, but I'll make sure I dive into that one next time. It's actually pretty easy. It's easier than it sounds if you're not familiar with it. Anything else?
Yeah, I think you've got just one there, Simon. I think it's more involved on the production side, I guess.
Is this where is this? Is this in the chat or is this in the Q&A?
Yeah. So do you mix your music or any compose?
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Do I mix my music or do I compose and send to another engineer? If you only create the music, where's the limit between creation? Okay, so I actually do everything myself. I mix, compose, everything myself, and it's all done in Pro Tools. I do use Ableton Live for fun, and we'll toy around and I'll bring stuff, and we're actually going to be introducing some really cool workflows with that. With the Ableton Live specifically soon, so keep your eyes and ears peeled. But yeah, I do everything on my own. I have worked with engineers previously, and what I like to do in that case is actually work with the engineer pretty early on, where I'm sending them snippets of things and kind of working with them to make sure I deliver the session in a way that they would like to have it. But yeah, I would say 90% of the time I'm mixing it myself. But I see what you're saying, because sometimes when you may be mixing at the same time when creating, that could extend the creation process a lot. So yeah, one of the things I'll mention there is taking air breaks and really making sure that you try and be as efficient as possible. Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to throwing effects on and doing volumes. The first thing I'll do is when I know I'm now past the arrangement stage and going to start mixing, is I'll do a save as. And then I'll zero everything out and kind of start from scratch, because if I'm going to start from the version that I've kind of been working on, typically that's going to be the one where I'm turning the volume up all the way and my ears are going to be shot. The mix is going to be pretty bad for the most part. So I like to start from scratch. So that, yeah, I hope that answers that. Yeah, it's something we all kind of go through, especially if you're mixing your own music.
There's
and then
one
Peter,
actually, I was going to say, there's one about recording, and again, we're sort of straying into another area. So maybe this is something that we could certainly tackle in a future webinar, because I think the whole sort of experience of tracking with vocalists and reducing latency and comes back to, you know, what you've been talking about, HDX and HD native, and you know, getting the best results from that, and also from, you know, just kind of standard core audio equipment. So I think maybe that's something that we can look at digging into in a future one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to thank you for that, Dave. And I do want to take the opportunity with that, but to say, hey, we're going to kind of wrap up here. Again, you know, thank you all so much, you know, for allowing me to do this. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy sharing my little bit of knowledge with everyone. So I hope that was helpful and at the very least fun. You know, we take all the questions, even if we don't get to them, we actually archive those and we kind of go back and look at them. You know, Dave, Simon, the teams, we actually go back and look at, you know, other events, other webinars we want to do. So I'd certainly like to come back and continue kind of expanding on, you know, diving deeper into some stuff, but there's so much other stuff that we do here. I mean, you know, with Pro Tools and the Avid, we cover everything. So it's not just music creation, it's audio post, it's everything. So we want to make sure we address some of that. And I think that would be a really great one to kind of dive into in another webinar. And I do again want to, you know, give say a huge thank you to the product specialist team all around the world. You know, these guys and girls are so amazing. We are very lucky to have them, and I want to say thank you to them for helping me and the marketing. And so we also want to say a huge thank you to our social media director Wim and Claire and Carrie, who kind of are our marketing folks that help us kind of put this all together. A lot of hands in the kitchen, but you know, all working together to make this happen. It's not just one or a couple people. It's quite a good number of us. And I want to say thank you to all of them because it's not just, like I said, it's not just one of us. You know, of course, I'm very thankful to all of you for being here. I want to quickly just kind of mention that we've also launched a new podcast today, and we're very excited about it. It's called the Audio Evangelist. So I'm the host. The first episode launched today, so you can find that wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud. Check our social media feed, you know, for links there. Francois Carrel, who's our director of Pro Tools software and our control surfaces, was my first guest, and we've got some really cool stuff planned. So I hope you guys check that out as well. Again, I want to say thank you to our entire team. Dave, Simon, thank you for being here. Sheree, Lauren, let's see, Oscar. I know I'm forgetting folks. Gaurav, all over the place. Thank you guys so much. And again, thank you to all of you for being here. I hope that was enjoyable for you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.